So do you think it's easy for a church to turn into a cult?
It's easy for a church to turn into a cult.
Yeah.
Not if, okay, I will say this. I think churches that have a denominational structure, that's much more difficult.
Right. Okay.
Okay. For your independent churches,
Yeah.
it might be easier today than it's ever been. And this, by the way, our church is an independent church, so I'm being careful with this. I'm not knocking independent churches. What I'm saying is that a couple of things happen in independent churches. One, it's easy for the church to be built around the kind of the personality of a pretty charismatic leader.
Okay.
And the pastor. And so the pastor's given so much status by the people he's leading, those that are in the church. And then, man, you combine that with like a social media following, it really kind of become like that cult of personality, where everything's kind of built around this person. And what he says, man, that is the truth. And we have the best pastor, and he is the one who really knows the word, and he's the one who has got really the truth from the Lord, and then
the pastor gets a big head and thinks they can do whatever they want.
Yes.
Okay. And tell everyone to do whatever he wants.
Right. And that's what, and that kind of, and being an independent church, what happens is in a lot of independent churches, there's not the proper accountability structures.
Okay.
So for example, our church is independent, and I am on the board, and I'm and I'm one of the elders, but there's limitations. Right? Like in our bylaws, there's boundaries, limits for what I can do.
But
right?
You wrote the bylaws.
Nope. That's our board agreed on the bylaws.
No.
Well, I don't want to be like, well, Joseph wrote the bylaws, so there's probably a loophole in there somewhere. No. So our board actually spent months putting the bylaws together.
That's a long time.
And it was a long time. It was a long process.
Why don't you just copy someone else's bylaws?
Well, the thing was, we took actually 3 different groups' bylaws.
Okay.
And we kind of morphed them together.
Okay.
To fit ours. And then we sent it off to a lawyer and was like, hey, what do you think? And then they had to redline it.
You sent it to a lawyer?
Yeah.
Why?
We needed the attorney to look through the bylaws.
For what?
To make sure that we had everything that we needed in there legally. These are our legal documents.
Oh.
Yeah, this isn't like...
You're not talking about your statement of faith thing.
It's in there too, actually. Our statement of faith is in our bylaws.
Oh.
But in our bylaws is all of the structures and the responsibilities for our board of directors, for our elders, for the pastor, all that's in there in our bylaws.
Why do you need all that? I don't get it.
It's protection, actually. Well, one, you have to have the legal protection. But for our setup... it provides the accountability I'm talking about. It provides that accountability, right? So, for example...
Oh, in case people are, stealing or...
Yeah, or even, so for me as a pastor, so we have our budget, right, that we produce, that the board produces every year.
Right.
So the board produces a budget, and then and it's, broken down, and so every ministry has this much budgeted. Mm-hmm. And so as long as we're staying in those budgeted, restrictions, we're good. But if I wanted to do something that's not clearly in the budget, or that's not clearly stated in the budget, and if it's over $500, I can't do it. I have to get, without board approval.
Okay.
I have to get the whole board's approval. And even if it is $500, let's say, I have to.
Otherwise, they sue you.
No, they're not going to sue me, but it gives them ground to fire me if they wanted to.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it's just.
So you can't.
I can't, my name's not on the check. I can't write a check.
There's other people that could fire you.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, really?
And that's kind of the thing. Oh. Right, yeah. If our whole board and all our elders, if they came together, the way it was...
Is this how a lot of churches do stuff?
Depends on how they set it up. Okay. So again, in your denominations, you got the denominational structure.
I mean, a lot of
independent churches, it should be this way.
Okay.
Where the pastor has to have accountability.
Right.
Right? So for example, my elders and my board, if they all came together and they all agreed it's time for Joseph to go, I'm out.
Well, that's a thing.
Well, it is. But it's healthy.
Yeah.
Because it keeps though I sit on the board, I don't have veto power. My vote doesn't count any more than the other 6 individuals on the board. And we have it in our bylaws of what has to be majority vote or what has to be unanimous.
I want to be on the board.
It's all these things in there. Well, we can have a conversation about that, Nate, and see who nominates you or not. All right, so
God nominated me.
Oh God, you're definitely on the board. All right, so so there's the board, and then we have elders, and our elders, like I'm one of the elders, so we give spiritual direction and vision and teaching to the church at large. So like one of our elders can come up, to me and be like, "Hey, Joseph, you said this from the pulpit, but you taught that, but can we talk about that because that doesn't sound right?"
Okay.
It's great. It's just awesome.
So that's how your church
kind of
keeps you from being a cult.
It's not like we set out to say, how do we keep from being a cult? But it is how we set out to say, how can we keep the pastor from having unchecked accountability?
Okay.
Because I think that's where independent churches can get into trouble, is when a singular person has the ability to just do whatever they want to do in the church, right? Like pastors who get busted for like financial fraud and stuff, like that's impossible for me in our church. Like that, it would just never happen. It couldn't happen. I never handle money, that are like the offerings and stuff. I never handle it. I don't know who gives what. I don't have acts. Like I can't write a check. I can't nothing. So that kind of stuff helps give parameters and guidelines to pastors.
So I've been given all this money and you haven't even noticed?
Man. Oh, you're the one that gave that big donation.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. I have no idea. Yeah. I have no idea. And so, but I think that's, one of the cool things about the setup we have, right? Like there's enough checks and balances.
Okay.
Right? Like they trust me to.
Wait, I thought you said you didn't know the money.
No, I don't.
Well, how do you know there's enough checks?
Enough checks. What?
And balances.
Anyways, moving on from Nate's terrible joke. All right, so, but I think for me, it's just like, I think that's when churches could get in trouble, is when the pastors have this unchecked authority, right? And that's not healthy. Like every church needs to have a protection mechanism for their pastors.
So the churches that don't have that protection for their pastor, how do you think that would go? Like, what is the order of events, basically?
Yeah. So, a lot of times, especially the pastors, like the founding pastor,
yeah,
or the church was founded and there's not like a lot of clear guidelines in the bylaws or anywhere else. Then what can happen is now the pastor is because the pastor will be like the president of the company, quote unquote.
Okay.
And so that's like on the legal side, right? Mm-hmm. Like when so when you're submitting, your articles of incorporation, you submit the president, vice president, and treasurer are, or I don't think the vice president is even required, but like the president, treasurer, and secretary, Mm-hmm. And so like who are those individuals? So pastor's the president. Pastor oversees the books, pastor when it's like that, pastor can write the checks. That's where it can start. And then and I'm sure it never means to go. Well, I'm sure sometimes it does, but I'm sure a lot of times it's not like set in place for the pastor to abuse that stuff. But then what can happen is over time, the church grows and the pastor still has all the authority to make all of the decisions on the spiritual things, on what we're going to teach, on the financial matters, on who we're hiring and who we're firing. Like I can't even hire, someone without the board's approval.
Okay.
And the board would do, like we have it built in, the board does the interviews.
So in these churches where they run and everything, it's like they could go spend all the money and then need money. And then, now we're forcing everybody to pay this much money, which is a cult-like thing and stuff like that. And I need you to behave this way so you're not spending all your money because I need your money. And
yeah, it can get like that.
And
sure.
God said do this even though he didn't really do.
Sure.
So that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think that's why I say that like those independent churches have the highest risk
Okay.
Because so many of them are started by the pastors, and the pastors are entrusted with everything. And that's not always the best thing in the world.
Okay.
You know, like, so there's ways you can be an independent church and really have the internal accountability and structure that's needed, like our church.
Yeah.
But then I think there's other churches that don't have that. It's not in the bylaws, and maybe no one even knows what's in the bylaws, right? I mean, so.
That seems like all of them would eventually be a cult.
Well, thankfully, there are people who still love Jesus that lead churches,
I
and
mean,
it doesn't become that way.
I hear you, but mistakes can get made.
Yeah, 100% they can get made.
Yeah.
Yeah, and especially like, you know, like you're beyond the founding pastor and you're moving on to other, you know, other people leading.
Oh, you mean
you
like the pastor's son is now the pastor?
Right, or that kind of
and
stuff.
He's just going to milk this thing to the ground?
Right, right. Or whatever, right? And so, you're 2, 3, 4 generations away from the founding pastor, and now this new person still has the same authority because that's just been the way it's been, right? But now maybe they want to take the church in a whole different direction, and we're going to, get a massive mortgage for this huge building and whatever.
Right.
So, yeah, I just think things like that start happening, and I think it's just easier in those kind of independent churches for them to become cult-like, even if they're not cults themselves.